The three Metamorphoses, a concept created by Friedrich Nietzsche in his book Thus Spoke Zarathustra, tells how new values are created in our society. In this concept, Nietzsche describes a spirit that first becomes a camel, then transforms into a lion, and finally into a child. Let's understand this concept more deeply. First, the spirit becomes a camel. The camel spirit is described as a load-bearing spirit burdened by societal values that suppress its will. The camel is told to mortify its pride by humiliating itself, by which it's killing its own subjectivity, which is celebrated in society. Because of these societal values, the camel must kill its own will and cause. It must face the "thou shalt," a dragon that represents societal values. The "thou shalt" dragon dictates that certain values are the only real values and that nothing more needs to be created. It tells the camel to stay as it is and conform to societal expectations. Even though the camel must kill its own will, it still must follow the societal values and bow to the "thou shalt" dragon. Because of its heavy burden, the camel is driven into a vast wilderness by means of the perceived madness through this burden of dusty values. The loneliness of this wilderness frightens the camel, causing it to question the values it has been following. It starts to have power over all this burdened madness so that it transforms into a lion. The lion stops bowing to the "thou shalt" dragon and begins to create its own freedom through power over wilderness. The wilderness represents the madness and solitude that the camel experienced as a load-bearing spirit. These experiences led the camel to believe that it should rebel against old values and have power over all and ascend over the ongoing chaos, which is why it transformed into a lion. The lion roars in rebellion against the values it has been following, refusing to follow the "thou shalt" dragon any longer. When these values are destroyed, the lion becomes a child. The lion has now drained his energy for the sake of new values to be devised. Nietzsche describes the lion as unable to create new values. It can only rebel against old ones. When the spirit becomes a child, it is innocent and forgetful, allowing it to devise its own values, and also it is creative. This child spirit has a new, fresh own will and begins to create its own subjective world and identity, something that the camel spirit lacked. Now free of the dragon and societal values, the child spirit, with its innocence and forgetfulness, creates new values that lead to a more self-understandable life. And also because if its creativity, and this tells us that for a rebellion against the old values and to create new ones, we have to be driven out of complete madness. We are so burdened that we often drive into some madness and then into wilderness, but we have to have power over the madness and those old values. And because of the power over wilderness, we become more self-aware. Nietzsche believed that the more we get out of madness, the more wildness, the more suffering we go through, the more we know about ourselves, by which about our will by having power over them, but not by ignoring them. And that is what is the most essential thing in Nietzsche's philosophy, our own will. So this tells us finally that whenever new values are created or the old values are rebelled against, it is done through power over complete driven madness and wilderness, which then develops into more self-knowledge because of a developed solitude and will to power. Now that also tells us that in the midst of madness and wilderness, one develops a sort of solitude, which is will to power, which can make us devise new values and identity of our will.